Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
All right, Sam and Tracy, here's the deal, okay? We're recording this on Tuesday. This episode is going to come out Friday, so we're recording this before the big Fed decision. Yeah. So how about we plan for this? I'm going to ask you guys what your Fed forecast is, and then I'm going to ask you again, and we can record two versions of it, and then in the actual episode, we'll use whichever one was correct. Does that sound like a good plan?
I'm just going to hedge my bets and say I think they're going to cut by 37.5 basis points.
A hawkish 25 or a dovish 50.
Yeah, I think either after the announcement, I think either the high end or the low end of the Fed funds target is going to be 5%.
Okay. I did a deadlift.
1, 2, 3.
Hegemony.
Okay, good. Okay.
What two?
Hegemony. Barges.
This is an after-school special, except
I've decided I'm going to base my entire personality going forward on campaigning for a strategic pork reserve in the U.S.
Where's the best squid ink pasta?
These are the important questions.
Is it robots taking over the world?
No, I think that in a couple of years, the AI will do a really good job of making the Odd Lots podcast. And people will say, I don't really need to listen to Joe and Tracy anymore.
We do have
Cha-ching.
The perfect guest.
Welcome to Lots More, where we catch up with friends about what's going on right now.
Because even when Odd Lots is over, there's always lots more.
And we really do have the perfect guest.
Honestly, though, I think we're kind of splitting hairs. Don't you think we're kind of splitting hairs? 25, 50 basis points?
Well,
I go back and forth on this question.
I don't know. I think the interesting thing is we're journalists or media people, so we all kind of think...
We're journalists.
Yeah, okay. We're journalists, and we all sort of think about things in terms of size and scope. So the interesting size and scope for this meeting is everyone expects them to cut, but there's never been this much uncertainty about 25 bips versus 50 bips. Right. The market, the last time I checked, was pretty evenly split between the two of those.
Right. But yeah, no, in terms of backdrop, I think that's actually an important thing, right? Sure, it's never been more split in terms of what the consensus is, but why don't we also consider the fact that we're not on the cusp of an economic crisis?
Yeah,
right? We're not at the in the throes of the inflation crisis. So I feel like monetary policy developments and rate cut announcements and the press conference probably has more risk of market volatility when we have a market crisis as opposed to now where the stock market's at an all-time high, unemployment rate is relatively low, inflation is pretty calm. So I don't know. I think we're splitting hairs.
All right, no more conversation that's going to be completely irrelevant by the time everyone listening to this. We are speaking, of course, with Sam Rowe, who writes the fantastic Ticker newsletter, one of the Substacks that I actually open. And that's real.
Thank you.
That's real. I actually open it. I feel like, Tracy, newsletters, they're the new Economist subscription where, you subscribe to The Economist and then 8 pile up and then, people use.
I thought you were going to say in terms of prestige, way people always buy The Economist when they're at an airport so they can just be in the lounge with an Economist.
But also, it is kind of like that. But it's you subscribe to The Economist, I used to, but I didn't really read them. I
was actually on a content creator panel earlier this week for the Future Proof conference. And that question actually came up, how do you guys think about cadence and publishing schedule and all this kind of stuff? Everyone on the panel kind of had a different approach to this. Some people say, you got to do a daily thing. Keep the volume high because you never know what's going to hit, and one of those things are going to hit.
Or remind people that you're there. I hear that a lot. You have to remind people and be top of mind all the time.
Exactly. Give people, value for their money or whatever. I don't know. I kind of taken a contrarian approach to that. Sometimes I joke that the less I send, the more valuable my product is or whatever my output is. I try to think of the reader's time as much as possible. The magazine stacking up, right? There's a reason why that magazine stacks up is because you probably have other more important things to do. So I try to, be really careful about, sending stuff out that I think when people open it and read it, that they're glad that
Smart.
they did it. And so the next time they open it, then they'll be happy to read it. And if I'm not sending something out, that probably sends a signal that, I don't have anything to say that day.
Yeah. I always think that you should do what you're best at, right? There are some people who are actually Joe's one of them, who are very good at putting out thoughts on a daily basis.
I open that newsletter every morning too.
Thank you.
I
scroll.
There are other
Thank
people, probably me actually, who are better at kind of like selecting topics and then going deep into them.
Yeah. And you are very good.
Oh,
at that,
thank
Will.
you.
So
Thank you.
I will
There
return the
was a
compliment.
pause
But
just then.
that wasn't just like that sort of like de facto reciprocation. That's very real. Thank you. So we're out here at the Future Proof Festival, about the things on stage. But actually, what have you been writing about lately, Sam? You write every once in a while because you're so mindful of everyone's time, unlike me, who's always trying to be top of mind with everyone. You store up. What have you been talking about?
Well, I mean, market volatility has been kind of fun.
Yeah.
Kicking August off with that huge sell-off and then having the rebound and then kicking September off with that huge sell-off.
Wait, actually, here's another media question.
Yeah.
We're correlated to the VIX.
Yeah.
It's always good for a boost. And subscribers or listeners or Twitter followers, whatever. Do you find the same?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like, a bull market with low volatility is terrible for business because no one has any questions when the market's going up. They just open their 401k plan and they see the numbers going up and they're not concerned about it. They go on with the rest of their lives. They'll go shopping. They go to Disney World. They watch Netflix. It's only, when the numbers start going down, they're wondering, should I actually be more concerned about this? How do I think about this? Why haven't I made a plan about this? And, hopefully, I send something out that helps explain that. But yeah, no, I've mostly been writing about, and a lot of it is just repetition of the same old stats in that, market volatility is a thing. When volatility is low and the stock market is near record high, like those are the times where you have to start reminding yourself that, on average, you see a 14% max drawdown in a given year. So when you do see that big 5%, 10% drop in a week or two, if you have that mindset knowing that, I was prepared for a 14% sell-off, and this is completely normal. And, you just make the best out of that situation as opposed to panic and try to make a plan in the throes of that mess.
But August was so weird. We've spoken about this a number of times now, but like it was so sharp, the drawdown, and so freaking short-lived, right? Like 3 days, basically, where it was the end of the
15
world.
minutes.
Yeah, and the Fed's going to cut by 100 basis points, and the central bank needs to be out there talking to people about what's going on. And then, it's September, and I can barely remember what happened.
Yeah, it was strange. And I still think people don't know what happened.
I was about to ask, what's your take on what caused the sell-off? Because this is the other thing that I think was interesting. There was such a huge narrative around the carry trade unwind. And then it was like, whoa, we all kind of forgot about it a week later. Right.
I mean, you have to learn all that stuff in real time. I mean, I think that's why it's such great, work to be in media and journalism and research and all that kind of stuff. When stuff like that happens and people start screaming about carry trade unwinds and movements and other markets that you should be worried about that might be somehow related to why the U.S. markets are down. When you hear stuff like that, that to me kind of echoes of financial crisis because there was so much stuff going on in the crisis that was completely inscrutable. Like you hear a little bit about home prices are down and this and that. But it wasn't until they start talking about mortgage-backed securities and asset-backed securities and CDOs and all this alphabet soup that you've never heard of that you start to panic. And then afterwards, you realize that was a big deal. So when you do hear about these new, exotic trades that might be unwinding, you rush to do homework.
Joe, I just realized we can give the people what they want and just make this a conversation about financial media during 2008.
Oh, we could do that all over again. I love that idea. We're here at the Future Proof Festival, and for people who don't know what it is sort of like associated with the whole Barry Ritholtz, Josh Brown crew. Most of the people in attendance are registered investment advisors, and that's actually a world that we really have not ever covered on much, but it's absolutely gigantic and crucial and growing. And so these are people or small companies, typically a few people maybe, and they manage people's money. You're pretty plugged in. I feel like you're really plugged into that world. I feel like you're probably like a very must read among many of the people here. You're a celebrity here. Like, tell us about RIA world as you see it.
I mean, I don't know. I couldn't speak too much about the business, but the culture, actually very much reminds me of the whole independent, newsletter writer, media creator kind of thing, where, there are so many services and things that you can outsource now. And the regulation is very friendly that, because a lot of these people here used to work at bigger firms.
Yeah.
They come from places like UBS and Morgan Stanley and decided that, they were sort of beholden to, an organization or a
way of doing business.
A way of doing business that they thought they could do it differently or do it better. And, this whole boom in RIAs basically said, hey, I can probably take a risk. I see all these other people doing it. I'm going to give it a shot. And then, conferences like this happen where you can just walk around and people will give you all the answers to all your questions.
And so like a lot of the attendees are RIAs here. And then there are all these booths and they're all the companies selling services to RIAs. So it's like, we'll handle your tax things and we'll handle your back-end infrastructure or we'll handle your social media marketing or like all of these services, including like we'll handle your portfolio construction.
Right.
So really the only thing that they need to do on their own is to read Sam's newsletter and then tell their clients about how stocks always go up.
Or,
I've been saying that all
just
week.
sound smart in front of clients,
But
right?
that's like a big thing, right?
Yeah. No, that really is it. Like, even what I do is, there's not a whole lot of original stuff coming from me. I do a lot of a lot of my work is curation and just sort of amplifying the work of other people. And, those are the kinds of conversations I do have with, a lot of these professionals here is, you help me save time, doing the research and finding interesting stuff, because instead of me having to, read 15 pages of the Wall Street Journal every morning, I'll read your Sunday newsletter and come out with like 6 different stats that I could talk about with clients next week. As much as I'm here to, enrich readers or help people become better investors, there's nothing stopping anybody from just ripping stuff off from my newsletter and then sending it out to their clients.
That's kind of what media is there for.
Sure.
I feel like it's there to provide the talking points. And so Bloomberg famously has something called the market wrap, which sits on our top menu all the time. And it basically summarizes what's going on in the market. And I remember there used to be a discussion about like, well, why do you need something that's just telling you if the S&P 500 went up or down that day? And the answer is because there are a lot of people out there who need to like talk to their clients and basically summarize what's been going on in the market. And if they can do it by just reading this one thing, it's actually really useful.
Right. And, there's a lot of ways to define a lot of people. Right? Like if you're doing this at an organization where you actually have to have really big numbers to justify this kind of service, then, you time it and you have to actually define what a lot of people is. But for me, a lot of people might be 20,000 people or 50,000 people. And those smaller audiences might be on a different kind of schedule or might be on a different kind of cadence. When I've done research into the newsletter business, the financial newsletter business, I do know that the biggest audiences exist in the mornings, Monday through Friday, daily before the markets open. I don't have the capacity to write every morning, but I do know I'm missing out on an audience that way, but I'll send something out every Sunday. And there's an audience that exists for that. It's not as big as the weekday audience, but they do exist. And it turns out they are actually being underserved by some of these other places that go for the high volume play.
Joe, speaking of a lot of people, that's like one of 2 things that I've learned about RIAs while I'm here is that like there's a lot of them.
There are a lot of them, yeah.
And like the number of RIAs that are at this particular event seems to basically be doubling every year, which, a lot of that credit to Barry and Josh and what they've built here. And then the second thing I learned is that they all wear polo shirts.
Yeah, dry fit polo and leisure workwear and
Hoka sneakers
right.
or those Nikes that are really comfortable and stuff like that.
Right,
I know I have a pair of those Nikes. I call them my old man early bird buffet shoes because I run because they're running shoes, but I don't run. but they are really comfortable to stand in. So like if I'm standing in line at a buffet at 6 a.m, I'm going to be in running shoes.
Yeah.
Actually, I just noticed, Joe, you're wearing like
I'm wearing
flip-flops
slides
with socks.
I know I don't know why. I like having my feet warm, but I also like being able to slip in and out of slides.
It's
real
very
quickly.
Gen Z of you.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. So I've been told that's very hip. The other thing too that I think this crowd is really into, and it makes sense from the perch of the investment advisors, they love behavioral stuff. They love stories about how irrational people are. There seems to be a limitless appetite for various studies that show that the human brain responds more to fear and that we sell at the exact wrong times and just all the ways we're irrational. But it makes sense because that's like the main thing they have to do to tell their clients to like just remind them not to sell at the bottom, right?
Right. Yeah. And, to your point, it makes sense. It's funny. There's so much about finance that's theoretical, that's very quantitative, that's based off of models with, different quantitative inputs you put, and like something comes out the other end and that thing never happens because people are irrational, right?
Yeah.
But when you hear about that, you realize that the markets are much more intuitive than you think, right? Like I'm one of many people who are trying to trade the stock market, but I'm also going to panic and freak out when the markets sell off. Like that's just sort of my nature. And now someone's explaining to me that actually there's a whole field of study based off of this. And every week someone is coming out with a new paper, telling you about behavioral finance. And this is how markets work. That's something that I always thought was really interesting when I first read The Intelligent Investor, which is honestly, it's kind of a dense read and it's kind of boring. But there's a lot of it in there that, talks about, behavioral biases and how.
So they've known about this forever.
Forever. This is not groundbreaking stuff. Like I think it's more popular now with the work of, Thaler and Schiller and all these people who are doing a really nice job of telling that story. But, behavioral finance has been around forever.
You know what I don't get about this particular event? Joe, you described how there are all the booths there and they're providing services for RIAs. But what do the RIAs talk about when they talk to each other?
Yeah, and they're all standing around holding their beers and tacos and stuff like that.
They're all competing
for the
same clients. By the way, an RIA pitched himself to me and some of my fellow Bloomberg journalists. And it was a bit patronizing because he came up to us and he was like, "Oh, I'm an RIA." And we were like, "Well, what do you do exactly?" And we meant that as like, who do you work for? Right. What exactly do you do? And he was like, "Well, I manage money. One day when all of you are rich and famous, you need to find someone like me to manage your money for you." And we were all kind of like, okay, we understand that part.
Sure.
You don't need to pitch to us. But I assume they're all competing against each other for client money.
Yeah, I mean, what do journalists talk about when they get together? Like, there's a big CNBC presence out here. What do the CNBC people say to the Bloomberg people? Like, there's obviously stories that I'm sure that they can exchange notes on. And, as much as you're competing with people, you're also exchanging notes, right? Like, especially like in this independent game, they're probably all talking about how terrible their the last company that they worked with were.
You know what you're also getting? A tax-deductible vacation to Orange County, California.
That's something my accountant has been telling me.
Yeah.
Well, you run your own business now, so
That's
I'm sure
right.
like tax is actually something you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, I'm the CFO. I approve the expenses. I'm HR, and I do all the infotech. But yeah, no, it's a big part of it, and I think something that's been kind of a positive experience about going independent is understanding and appreciating all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the tax code is designed to encourage businesses to go out and do business stuff.
Here's a thought. It's not about the conference. It's not about investing. When I come down here, one of the things I'm reminded of is like, America is just insanely rich. Obviously not everyone. But the thing that I think about a lot in America is that like you can have a house in Newport Beach. You can have a boat on a marina in Newport Beach. You can go to a restaurant where clients, if you're rich enough, have their own wine locker in the restaurant so that they can just like keep their wine there. And you could be a total nobody and have all that. Like you really, like that's the amazing thing about America is like there are all these people that have like so much wealth, and like in many other countries, they would be like a prince, or they would be the person that owns the regional Coca-Cola beverage distributor or whatever. Here you could basically be a total nobody and never have really like done anything, and still, like, if you're lucky enough, have that life.
Well, it's not even just Southern California.
Yeah,
either,
it's
right?
everywhere. Yeah,
because it's like, we're surrounded by wealth advisors, and they come from all over the country.
Yeah.
And that's something I've also.
I'm not calling them total nobodies.
Oh no, not.
I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, no, they're flying under the radar, and they're not on the Forbes 400.
Yeah,
like you can have $100 million, and no one will ever hear about you.
Have ever heard of your name?
But these people exist. These families exist in every state of the country, and so when you do meet someone who has a team of 20, analysts, but they're in Sioux City, Iowa, it might be jarring for people from bigger cities that are dealing with just ungodly amounts of wealth. Mm-hmm. But there are actually massive amounts of wealth across the country in every city. And, that's something that's kind of interesting about going to these events where, they all provide similar or very same services to all these people, but, culturally they're a little bit different. I mean, did you see there's a booth that's got like guys with cowboy boots and cowboy hats?
Is that
like,
Texas Capital?
Texas something.
Yeah. Texas Capital. I think they also do like a barbecue.
They had beers last night. So shout out to Texas Capital for providing easily accessible beers at the event. Appreciated that one. Wait, okay. So I have an important question, but are you going to listen to Third Eye Blind later?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, the only thing I'm really excited about it. The only thing I'm concerned about is I only know 2 of their songs.
So that's one more than most people.
Well, there are, only 2 of them became like a thing. So I don't think that's unusual.
Yes, I don't know how long their set is, if it's like 30 or 45 minutes or an hour, but I'm sure it'll be great. Live music's always great, right?
Tracy, I really want to do an episode on the music industry tour for events, because a lot of these events have them, and they're always like someone who is really big like 20 years ago, and because everyone at the event is like kind of like our age, middle age, etc., they're like people that we liked. I was never into Third Eye Blind. People we quote liked when we were younger, and then it's like, oh, we're seeing Third Eye Blind, or it's like, oh, we're seeing Nelly, or Sugar Ray, or just like any of these bands. But like how that works, and like their pricing, and how like, okay, let's say we're throwing an Outlaws event one day on the beach, and we're like, we want to get someone like, who do we talk to get the price list of the bands? I want to do that episode.
Yeah, there must be like a market or an agency
there must be, right?
that specializes in like one-hit wonders from the 90s.
Or just like the whole, like what happens when a mega celebrity, is out of the spotlight. When people, quote unquote retire in their 20s or 30s after they hit their peak, they can still go out and have like, a lucrative career, either doing exactly what they're doing or marketing their brand, or just completely going into different.
The other one that's kind of like very closely related to this is concerts and musicians at casinos, but not Vegas. But like if you go to like Atlantic City and go they're like, oh, Earth, Wind, and Fire is going to be performing or something like that. And how that works, because again, they're not like, they're long past their prime.
Right.
But I guess they're not like fully retired. Yeah. And so how that market works for like those artists and stuff like that, like.
I was actually just thinking about this because I remembered that in high school, I was a really big fan of 311. And so one day I decided to just Google it, and it turns out they're on tour.
Yeah.
And like there's so many bands.
They're always in random towns.
They're always in random towns and smaller venues and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of funny. You just think about bands that you haven't really thought about for a while. And you just Google it.
They're still grinding away.
Half of them are like currently on tour, and they're grinding away, and you can go see them in like an intimate venue.
311, I don't know what they're called. They have some concerts coming up. They're going to be in Ocean City, Maryland. On the September 27th, Agora Hills, which I don't know where that is, on October 11th, and Anchorage, Alaska on September 20th.
Yeah.
So they're grinding away.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that they do that because, it brings attention to some of these smaller cities. Not that, this is not a Taylor Swift tour, right? but like the hardcore fans will drive for 2 hours to go see a show.
Well, I was going to say, you're talking about smaller cities, but where I am in Connecticut, there's a very famous county fair. And it's like exactly what you would think of as a county fair. There's cows and pigs and chickens and things, and like prizes for the most beautiful tomato grown every year. But they do have a musical act.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who it was this year, but it's like, it is people, well, mostly from the 1970s, like smaller bands.
Yeah.
And they're touring county fairs across America.
They're always very notable names.
Yeah.
Sugar Ray, I just looked up them. They're also playing Ocean City, so there must be some sort of festival.
See, there you go.
And then September 28th, they're playing at the Seneca Casino in Niagara Falls, New York. So the tour lives on.
I think it's funny that we're just talking about like touring music acts when we started out with the Fed.
Yeah.
But there we are.
You know, you go from macro to micro and, you know, whatever. There you go. That's the real economy for you.
Lots More is produced by Carmen Rodriguez and Dashiell Bennett with help from Moses Ondam and Cale Brooks.
Our sound engineer is Blake Maples. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts.
Please rate, review, and subscribe to Odd Lots and Lots More on your favorite podcast platforms.
And remember that Bloomberg subscribers can listen to all our podcasts ad-free by connecting through Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.